Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to our visitors. We're really happy that you've joined us this morning. And if you haven't stopped by the newcomer table in Robinson Lounge yet, please do so after the service. We can add you to our e-lists and invite you to all the different programs and everything we have going on at UU Princeton. And it's always a lot. There are 3 things happening this Sunday, today, after the worship service. The first is that we have our Zen meditation and practice group that meets in Foz Theater. It's perfect for beginners and experienced meditators. All are welcome. They will start at about 11:45 or so. And also today, we have our special music ministry concert. You can join Tom Reicher, Marcus Cheney, and friends in a unique event featuring peaceful meditation music performed with crystal bowls, Native American flutes, and other instruments. That's at noon today, right here in Channing. Or after worship is our second annual meeting discussion session. We'll meet in Founders. If you're a member of the congregation and have questions about what's on our agenda for that annual meeting, stop on by and we can go over everything. So after worship, you've got, what do you have? Zen meditation, you have music, or annual meeting agenda items. We have something for everyone here at UU Princeton every Sunday. Speaking of that annual meeting, that is next week, immediately following our flower celebration worship service. Please bring a flower with you to that service, and you'll randomly exchange it as part of the liturgy. It's a joyful and rich tradition in our faith and congregation. We will also welcome Reverend Jennifer back from her sabbatical during the service next week, and then we'll have the annual meeting, and then we'll have the spring picnic, big Sunday for us. That's a really fun event and a great way to celebrate our year together. We do ask you to sign up for that picnic on our website so that we know how much food to purchase. And if you can bring a salad or a side dish or a dessert, there's a way to do that as well. And lastly, this afternoon after the service, when you get your coffee or tea, we hope you'll consider signing up to be a coffee volunteer every now and again. Volunteers work in pairs and with Jorge's help, set up and then clean up. We always need volunteers for coffee, but the summer in particular can be a little tricky for that. So if you can sign up, please do so, and know that you'll be making everyone feel more at home here on Sunday mornings, which is a great gift to all of us. And now let us be together for this hour to remember peace, to praise the good, to care for one another, and to grow in love. Come, let us worship together.
And now, may we have faith in life to do wise planting that the generations to come may reap even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. This we ask, that the fields of promise become fields of reality.
Our prayer this morning is a blessing written by John O'Donohue. I invite you to join together in the spirit of prayer and meditation. May the beauty of your life become more visible to you, that you may glimpse your wild divinity. May the wonders of the earth call you forth from all your small secret prisons and set your feet free in the pastures of possibility. May the light of dawn anoint your eyes, that you may behold what a miracle a day is. May the liturgy of twilight shelter all your fears and darkness within the circle of ease. May the angel of memory surprise you in bleak with new gifts from the harvest of your vanished days. May you allow nothing to quench the candle of hope in your heart. May you discover a new generosity towards yourself and encourage yourself to engage your life as a great adventure. May the outside voices of fear and despair find no echo in you. May you always trust the urgency and wisdom of your own spirit. May the shelter and nourishment of all the good you have done, the love you have shown, the suffering you have carried, awaken around you to bless your life 1,000 times. And may you come to see your life as a quiet sacrament of service, which awakens around you a rhythm where doubt gives way to the grace of wonder, where what is awkward and strained can find elegance, where hope can find wings, and torment enter at last unto the grace of serenity. May divine beauty bless you. And here in the silence of this sacred space, we offer these, the prayers and meditations of our hearts. May it be so, and amen.
When my mother was 17 years old, her mother, Lita, passed away. My mother was the only one at home by my grandmother's side. Her siblings were at elementary school and my grandfather was at work. No one had expected it to be the day she would succumb to her illness. My mother never spoke very much of those last moments together with her mom. She did, however, speak very freely about how life went on for her family, about her father's subsequent depression, alcoholism, and abusive behavior, and about the disintegration of the family that was left behind. When I was 7, my great-grandmother, Lita's mother, came to live with my mom and I. Wilma was very German and already in her mid-80s. Over time, her memory deteriorated, as did her ability to speak English, which was never great to begin with. Her German-speaking friends, who had all been a part of a World War I and II diaspora community, had died long ago. I still remember how she would sometimes simultaneously laugh and cry in despair when trying to express herself. Long before she finally passed away at the age of 96, I had felt that she had disconnected from a life that brought her any comfort or joy. Wilma had died my freshman year of college. My mother, though now released from the very difficult and consuming lifestyle of working full-time while also caring for a child and an elderly relative, began coming home every day to an empty house for the first time. She began to talk about being lonely when I would call from school to check in with her. She told me she was surrounded by younger people at her job who seemed to come and go. Gone were the days when employees worked at the same company for 30 years as she had, as were the days of company sports teams and after-work happy hours. Most employees of the old guard were opting to retire early. Her office had been moved from the bustling, sunny atrium to a windowless, out-of-the-way corner. I noticed she had started drinking regularly and increasingly heavily in the evenings. At the time, I distanced myself, feeling angry and confused, ascribing her behavior to a lack of self-control rather than to what, in retrospect, was clearly emotional distress. When I started to recognize and accept the reality of her suffering, I still felt too much shame and helplessness to reach out to anyone. I imagine she felt the same. A few years later, things did start to turn around for her, and our relationship began to mend and mature. Of course, at that same time, neither of us had any idea that it would be the very last year of her life. I was by her side when she passed away, in a scene that I imagine was similar to the one she must have shared with her mother. My mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother are 3 generations of ghosts that haunt me to this day in several ways. To begin with, I'm haunted by my own callousness and self-absorption during the time spent with my mother and my great-grandmother. To this day, I often think of how I could have reached out better, asked more questions, and shown more interest and compassion. I'm haunted by the void of the grandmother I never met, and how the totality of a life can be so quickly reduced to just a handful of photographs and anecdotes. I think of how my own children will experience the same void with their grandmother, a person who once meant everything to me. I'm haunted by each of these women's endings, the loneliness, the battle with too much or too little time, the lost potential of what their lives could have been and what their endings should have been. These ghost stories show me that a life can mean so much and so little at the same time. They remind me that we do, in fact, know for certain that there is life after death. After death, life simply continues on. At least it does for all who are left behind in this world and for all who are yet to come into it. All of us here today are both witnesses and proof of this afterlife. Whenever I find myself asking something like, how can I live my life to the fullest? My ancestors, with their fizzled endings, reply, fullness. You're not in the world to fill yourself up. You are in the world to empty yourself out. They tell me, if you want to die with a sense of fullness in your heart, then you must pour yourself out fully into the lives of others, into all that lives, and into the future you hope will be.
Once a father was near his death, so he gathered his 2 sons to be near him. He worried about his sons, for they were kind of lazy. They didn't know an honest day's work. They had always been provided for. They had never learned how to care for themselves, much less loved ones. And so the father wanted to leave them a treasure, but he wanted them to learn how to work for it. He told them that he had buried their inheritance somewhere in their big field. They would have to find it if they wanted it. They begged him to tell them where it was, but he went silent, and before long he died with his secret unspoken. After he was buried, the sons took shovels and plows and began digging up the large field looking for the treasure. They didn't find it, but they did realize that the ground was well suited for seeding after all that digging and plowing, and so they planted grain. After the harvest, they dug again, looking for the treasure, but again they didn't find it. They did see that they could plant, though, and so they did and had another bountiful harvest. This cycle continued. They never found the inheritance, but they did learn how to support themselves. They did learn work and teamwork and earned incomes, and before long, they were married and had children and led very happy lives. And each season before planting, they would go out and dig around in the field, eventually knowing that they wouldn't find anything. They did it just to reconnect with their father's wisdom, for he had left them with a treasure, just not the kind they were hoping for. He had left them not with riches, but with wisdom. One can imagine at the deathbed and in those early years of searching for the treasure, the children's frustration with their parent. One can sense even anger as riches are held out of reach, out of sight, out of pocket. One can imagine the younger ones haunted by the ploy of a parent, the trick of a trickster who even on his deathbed arranges for a hard lesson to be learned. As they dig in the ground, sweat covering their brows and calluses their hands, one can imagine the ghost of their father haunting them. But eventually that ghost becomes a guide and a teacher. The ghost becomes an ancestor whose legacy enriches the lives of their children and all the generations to come. And while the seeds of that transition were planted by the father nearing his death, they were harvested by his children when they turned his lesson from a burden into a blessing. Turning a ghost into an ancestor is not a choice of the dead. Rather, it's a choice of the living. It's a choice we make in how we live on with those whose lives have passed in our lives. Or so says the gospel of Bruce Springsteen. The New Jersey rocker was an early musical influence in my life. I remember my brother liking him quite a bit and playing his music very often. I also enjoyed it. I don't remember my sisters playing his music very often, but I do remember some Bruce posters in their bedroom at various points. The iconic Born in the USA one in particular, where we don't see his face, but we do see his blue jeaned adorned bottom with a red baseball cap in the back pocket just below a solid white t-shirt. They really liked that poster. Perhaps it wasn't his sound that most intrigued my older teen sisters. His was music that the whole family could listen to and enjoy, though. In our small house growing up, one with many people and many dogs, far before the advent of today's easily individualized music listening options, we all kind of listened to whatever someone else was listening to. We contested for control of the one stereo like we did for control of the one television. And as the youngest, I rarely had control of either. So I learned to like, or at least be able to listen to whatever they played or watched. But I really did enjoy Bruce and kept up with him over the years. There's a depth and grittiness that appeals to me probably even more now than it did then. He also seems silly in interviews, which I like. Kind of playful, like he doesn't take himself too seriously. And while I've never seen him live, I've seen videos and the energy is undeniable. These days, his voice is most often in my head when I'm out for one of my long runs and I start singing to myself to pass the time. And sooner or later, Baby, I Was Born to Run pops into mind. I know that song isn't about running thematically, but when your legs are dead and you have many miles to go, you don't find inspiration as much as you forge it. And Bruce's energy and insistence that I, as in me, as in he's singing to me individually, was born to run, is where the inspiration is in those moments. When he sings Tramps Like Us, Baby, We Were Born to Run, in those moments, he's singing about us. He and I are said tramps, and we are indeed doing the running that we were born to do. I know that's not what the song is about, but it's also exactly what the song is about in those moments. Bruce's contribution to the theme of ghosts and ancestors comes from his one-person Broadway show, in which he talks about the extremely difficult relationship he had with his father, who was not a good father in many ways, and whose presence haunted Bruce well after his father's death. He also goes into some detail about this relationship in an interview with President Obama. That's online if you Google it. And in turning the harm of that relationship into something healthy that can help him be a good parent and a good person, he says to President Obama, quote, "The trick is you have to turn your ghosts into ancestors. Ghosts haunt you. Ancestors walk alongside you and provide comfort and a vision of life that's going to be your own. My father walks alongside me as my ancestor now. It took a long time for that to happen," he concludes. It took a long time and a series of choices to make that shift in meaning occur. It took agency and probably a sense of safety and a desire for self-determination in terms of what kind of life we wish to live and relationships we wish to co-create. Auden's line that we are lived by forces we pretend to understand is most apt for the unexamined life. For when we dig deep into the soil of who we are, how we were raised, and with whom we were raised, we move from pretending to understand to understanding the forces that shape us. And with that, we can then reshape the forces. We can reimagine them, not ignoring the vice and the sin, but reinterpreting them as unchosen forces that have led us to claim and live lives that are, as Bruce says, our own. We are then not lived by others as much as we are free to live the lives we wish, taught by the past, but having examined and worked enough to not repeat it. Bruce talks about this not only as a child, but also as a parent, a role in which we are apt to repeat the virtues and vices with which we were raised. And if ghosts continue to haunt us, we may become those haunting those coming after us. So good parenting involves claiming that agency and choosing with intention to bless and not to haunt. It involves making choices, sometimes very difficult ones, that will lead us to be ancestors one day and not ghosts. Sometimes it involves repeating the virtues with which we were raised, and sometimes it means turning from the vices. And it always involves those generations to come, interpreting and reinterpreting who we are in the context of their unfolding lives. What we can do is act like ancestors all the time, act like them, live like them, know that we are sowing a legacy in the lives of those to come every day. And not only parents, everyone is building that legacy in the lives of those to come. We are all not only creating memories, but constructing realities that free and bind current and future generations. In the span of our communal lives, in justice, in caring, in learning, in creating art and beauty and knowledge and music, in expanding freedom, in forging the kind of peace that blesses each and all, we can haunt with our inaction. We can haunt with our cynicism, with our silence, with our disbelief in the basic humanity of those with whom we disagree. We can haunt with disparagement, with cruelty, with demeaning words and actions. Or we can bless with faith and hope and love. We can bless with words of peace and works of goodness. We can bless with optimism, never despair, drawing forth from our ancestors stories of people who changed life for the better with courage and creativity and community. We can be the blessing of the ancestor who embraces and encourages during those hard stretches of life. We can encourage and believe in one another. We can believe in people when they don't believe in themselves, and then we can watch that sense of freedom and strength overcome them. When we are tempted to haunt with words of objection and limitation, we can instead choose to bless with words of faith and possibility. When someone thinks they're not enough, not good enough, not smart enough, not creative enough, we cannot haunt with silence or agreement. Instead, we can be the ancestor who affirms, oh, yes, you are. You're more than enough. We can be the ancestors today, not after we die, who walk with others in lives of peace and fulfillment. And for some of us, as it did for Bruce, that means we have to turn our ghosts into ancestors so that we can avoid repeating what we wish to end. And for some, that means we have to look at when we've been the ghosts in the lives of others and confess and choose a different way of living. For we are all ghosts and we are all ancestors. We all haunt and we all bless. And we do neither all in waiting. We do it this day and every day, sometimes both and to the same person at the same time. We are never perfect, but neither are we ever lost. We are good, as is everyone, and we can always live in greater service of that goodness. And that is the treasure that ancestors leave for us and we can leave for those to come. Those sons in that first story had to dig around in a field looking for something less in order to find something more. Their parent tricked them and was for a while to them a ghost who became an ancestor who blessed his children for the rest of their lives and through their generations. And while Bruce talks about all that thematically today, that first story is Sufi Islamic in origin and was first noted around 1200 years ago. Through the ages, we've sought to bless and not harm, and yet we've done both. But what each teaches us today is that we can be less lived by others and live more freely and fully by turning, as we can, in our own ways, in our own timelines, toward that which haunts us and turning it into that which blesses. We can turn empty fields that we've been left into harvests that feed everyone we love. We can feed neighbor and stranger with that bounty. From those fields, we can grow sustenance and abundance and even things of simple beauty and joy. And in those fields of our souls, we can turn that which might harm into that which blesses neighbor and stranger right now. We can plow and plant those fields into life, into grain for bread, flowers for sympathy, and fruit for sweetness. May it be so, and amen. At the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light carries us until we gather again. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with everyone else by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.